Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, Founder Stories, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most visionary founders. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these trailblazers. Now let's meet our guest. Today we are joined by an extraordinary duo who turned a tiny 9-seat root beer stand into a legendary name in hospitality. Willard and Alice Marriott. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Calvin.
Thank you, Calvin.
The pleasure is all ours. Let's dive right in. When you first conceived of your business, the world was a very different place. What was the exact moment you realized society was moving in a direction only you could see? And how did you convince the early skeptics?
It goes back to a sweltering summer day when I passed through Washington, D.C. after finishing my missionary service. The humidity was absolutely brutal, and I stood on the street watching pedestrians and tourists just melt in the heat. Then I noticed a pushcart peddler selling cold drinks. In a matter of minutes, he was completely cleaned out of soda pop and lemonade. A light bulb went off. People didn't just want a cool drink. They desperately needed a place to escape the mugginess and quench their thirst. When I told folks back home in Utah that I wanted to open a root beer stand thousands of miles away in the capital, they thought I was spinning wheels. But I knew the climate was my built-in market. To convince the skeptics and get people to our tiny 9-stool stand, I had local high school girls pass out 1,000 free root beer tickets to folks stopped at traffic lights. Once they tasted that ice-cold A&W root beer on a humid day, they were hooked.
That is incredible instinct. Leaving behind safety to build something entirely unproven is a massive gamble, though. What did your life look like the day you decided to go all in, and what was the core belief that gave you the courage to take that first step?
My early life was spent working on my father's sheep and sugar beet farm in Utah. It was a hard scrabble existence, and by the time I finished college, my savings were slim. The day we decided to go all in, I had about $1,500 of my own savings and had to borrow another $1,500 from the bank to match my partner, Hugh Colton. I was 26 years old, taking every dime I had to my name to head east.
We were married on June 9th, 1927, just one day after I graduated from the University of Utah. Our honeymoon was a long, hot, incredibly bumpy drive from Salt Lake City to Washington, D.C. in Willard's old Model T Ford. We had no safety net, but our core belief was simple: hard work, absolute integrity, and giving people exceptional service would never fail us. We trusted each other completely, and that gave us all the courage we needed.
Talk about a memorable honeymoon. In the absolute beginning, when you had no data, no capital, and no blueprint, what was the one truth you held onto that everyone else around you dismissed?
Everyone thought a tiny, narrow storefront with 9 stools on 14th Street was just a flash in the pan. But the truth we held on to was that if you take care of your people will take care of the customers. Even when it was just the two of us and Hugh, we believed that hospitality wasn't a luxury reserved for the wealthy. It was a basic human standard of excellent service that every single individual deserved, whether they were buying a 5-cent mug of root beer or a full meal.
That philosophy clearly paid off. But long before your company became a household name, you hit a wall where everything nearly collapsed. Take us back to that first major failure. What went wrong? And how did you find the willpower to restart?
Our first major hurdle came around October of our very first year in 1927. The blistering summer heat faded, the chilly autumn air rolled into Washington, and suddenly, nobody wanted a cold glass of root beer. Our sales plummeted. We were looking at an empty stand and realized that if we didn't adapt immediately, the winter would completely destroy everything we had built. We didn't have the option to quit. We had to find a way to make the business viable in cold weather.
I remember that anxiety vividly. We realized we had to serve hot food, but we didn't have any recipes ready. So, I literally walked over to the Mexican embassy, knocked on the front door, and convinced the embassy chef to share his authentic recipes for hot chili and tamales. I took those recipes back to our tiny apartment, cooked the chili and tamales myself, and walked them down to the stand to sell to our customers. We rebranded as the Hot Shop, and those hot meals saved our business and gave us the willpower to push forward.
Knocking on the embassy door is pure genius, Alice. Innovation often looks like madness to contemporaries, though. Was there a specific product, philosophy, or strategy you were utterly convinced would work, but the public initially rejected or ridiculed? How did you respond?
It wasn't so much that they ridiculed it, but people thought we were stretching ourselves into madness when we decided to get into airline catering in 1937. We had a hot shop located right near Hoover Airport, and I constantly noticed our customers buying food to go. When I asked them why, they said there was absolutely no food served on the commercial flights. I approached the airlines and proposed packing high-quality boxed lunches to deliver directly to the planes before takeoff. People in the traditional restaurant business thought delivering hot food to a primitive airfield was a bizarre distraction. We responded by putting our heads down and doing it anyway. I would literally stand at the foot of the airplane stairs with a cart filled with boxed lunches, selling them for a dime. It turned into a massive, booming division for us.
Behind the legendary name was a human being facing immense pressure. Whether from financial panics, internal betrayal, or personal doubt. How did you shoulder that burden without letting the vision splinter?
The pressure was immense, especially as we grew through the Great Depression and expanded into managed cafeterias during the war. I was a perfectionist, a true hands-on manager. I used to go bird dogging through our kitchens at all hours of the day and night, running a finger over the shelves to check for dust and inspecting the cutlery drawers. It was exhausting, and the mental weight took a toll. I shouldered that burden by relying heavily on my faith, staying close to my family, and keeping my focus entirely on the well-being of our associates. I knew that if I kept my promises to our workers, the structure would hold.
Who were the very first people, beyond your immediate family, to buy into what you were doing? How did you convince early workers or customers to trust an entirely unproven concept?
Our very first business partner was Hugh Colton, a good friend from Utah who shared the initial investment with us and helped get that first stand up and running before his law studies took him back west. To convince our very first employees to trust us, we didn't just give them a job. We gave them our word that we would treat them like family. We paid them fairly, listened to their needs, and showed them that we were right there in the trenches with them, scrubbing floors and washing mugs side by side.
Can you take us to the exact moment where you felt the momentum shift? What was the specific milestone, contract, or breakthrough where you realized, we aren't just going to survive, we are going to change everything?
For me, a major shift was when we officially incorporated as Hot Shops Inc. in 1929 and started opening multiple locations, including the first drive-in restaurant on the East Coast. But the ultimate breakthrough that changed the entire trajectory of our legacy happened in January of 1957. We opened our very first hotel, the Twin Bridges Motor Hotel in Arlington, Virginia. We charged $9 a night plus an extra dollar for every person in the car. Seeing that motel succeed and watching our son, Bill Jr., successfully manage and expand that lodging vision made me realize we were no longer just a regional restaurant chain. We were pioneering a whole new standard of American hospitality.
You didn't just build a company, you built a distinct culture and philosophy that outlasted you. In the early days, when it was just a handful of people in a room, how did you instill that standard of excellence or service?
It started with absolute consistency. I was the first bookkeeper, the executive chef, and even the interior designer for our locations. When it was just a small group of us, Willard and I instilled that standard by modeling it ourselves every single day. We taught our staff that no detail was too small. A clean table, a warm smile, and a perfectly prepared meal were non-negotiable standards of respect for the guest.
History books often flatten a person's life into a neat, polished narrative. What is the biggest misconception people have about your journey, your character, or how your company was actually built?
People look at the global reach of the brand and assume it was built on a grand, complex master plan from day one. They see a polished corporate empire. The truth is, our journey was built on sheer grit, anxiety, and constant adaptation. We didn't start with a blueprint for a hotel empire. We started by trying to keep a 9-seat root beer stand afloat during a freezing winter. It was built one customer, one meal, and one clean room at a time.
Building an empire always requires a steep personal cost. Looking back at the entirety of your life, what was the hardest sacrifice you had to make for the sake of your vision, and was it ultimately worth it?
The hardest sacrifice was undoubtedly the endless hours and the relentless strain on my health and rest. For decades, I rarely ever rested. I breathed, ate, and dreamed about the business, often working around the clock. It meant many sleepless nights and immense stress.
It was a sacrifice for our whole family, balancing the heavy demands of a rapidly growing corporation with raising our two sons, Bill and Richard. But looking back at the honest livelihoods we provided for hundreds of thousands of employees and the joy we brought to travelers, it was absolutely worth it. We poured our hearts into it together.
If you could send a single sentence back through time to yourself on the very first day you started this venture, knowing every trial, triumph, and heartbreak that awaited you, what would you say?
I would say, trust in your faith, take care of your people above all else, and never underestimate the power of a cold drink and a warm welcome on a difficult day.
That is a powerful note to end on. Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with our listeners before signing off?
I would just like to tell your listeners to always keep being constructive and to do constructive things in this wonderful world. Take care of the people around you and they will take care of you. Thank you again, Calvin, for this truly wonderful opportunity to remember our journey.
Thank you, Calvin. It has been a beautiful experience to share our story, and we wish all your listeners the absolute best on their own entrepreneurial journeys.
Thank you both so much for coming on the show and sharing your incredible history with us. What an amazing look at how Willard and Alice Marriott built a global empire out of a tiny root beer stand through pure determination, care for their employees, and a willingness to adapt. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast, Founder Stories. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod